As Mumtaz has said, I'm a political scientist and I've specialized in state and nation building in South Asia for most of my academic life. And that I focus my studies on Pakistan and especially Balochistan is due to mere chance. Because as a young man, barely 20 years old, I decided to expand my horizons and travel across Asia after graduating from high school and before starting my studies at university, as many people of my generation did at that time. And at that time, the whole world was actually looking at China, the awakening giant, the new economic power and regional power and perhaps future world power. And the Tiananmen massacre was just 3 years ago, and I was quite disturbed by the consequencelessness of this student uprising. So I decided to go to China first. My first destination, I spent 3 months in the People's Republic of China, traveled from Beijing to Kashgar, from Lhasa to Shanghai, and left the country by Hong Kong, which at that time was still a British crown colony. But even after 3 months in China, I didn't really understand much of the country. And my next destination was India. I thought after the greatest dictatorship in the world, I should also have a look at the greatest democracy in the world, especially since both countries, of course, for centuries have been in conflict and competition with each other. And India was somehow much more familiar to me than China. Here, English was spoken, so I could talk to the people, exchange ideas, and even read books and the newspapers. But then slowly my time away was coming to an end, and the question arose of how to get back home and start my studies in time. And without much thinking, I set out to travel back overland to Europe. There was still Iran and Anatolia on the map, which I wanted to see. And when I indeed got an Iranian transit visa against my expectations, I just went to the border in Amritsar, took a rickshaw to Wagah and walked across to Pakistan. And to be honest, until that moment I did not really know that there was anything at all between the Iranian and the Indian cultural areas. Of course, on the map I could see there were two countries, Afghanistan and Pakistan. But from my point of view, this was something like a no man's land that had to be crossed in order to get home. So when I crossed the border and reached Lahore half an hour later, I was completely confused. I had crossed an international border, I had entered a new country, only to find that here exactly everything was the same as across the border where I came from. Same climate, same people, same food, even same language. Lahore was like the small version of Delhi, and Karachi was to me the slightly smaller brother of Bombay. But why two different countries? Of course, my guidebook told me it had something to do with religion, but I couldn't really understand it. Because also in India there were millions of Muslims and thousands of mosques. So while in Pakistan, Najibullah was lynched and hanged from a lamppost in Kabul, that was 1992, and a return trip via Afghanistan was thus out of question. And very reluctantly I decided to bypass Afghanistan to the south. So I took a train from Karachi to Quetta and wanted to see how I could get on from there. But now, again, the same happened in reverse. I reached Quetta and found to my great surprise that here now suddenly everything was completely different, although I had not crossed an international border. It was a different climate, different people, different food, different language. Men with huge turbans, long beards, and strange sandals dominated the cityscape, hung with Kalashnikovs and cartridge bells. And these people had, at least outwardly, nothing whatsoever to do with Pakistan or India. It was actually much more like I had imagined Afghanistan to be, but I was still in Pakistan. So during the first 3 or 4 weeks that I spent in Pakistan, it became clear to me that something was wrong with this country. Why are there borders? And why do these borders of the country not at the same time are cultural and linguistic borders? And why instead does the cultural and linguistic border run right through the middle of that country? I continued my travels. I went further via Nushki, Dalbandin and Taftan to Zaidan, just to find out that again I crossed the state border, but nothing had changed. On both sides, everything was pretty much the same. Balochistan, of course. It's only when I reached Kerman that I actually had the feeling I was in Iran, but that was 500 kilometers after crossing the border. So I returned to Germany in late summer of 1992 and began my studies in political science. And from the very beginning, it was clear that this strange state called Pakistan would be my focus of interest and attention. I had experienced firsthand that Pakistan was obviously a very artificial state, but no one seemed to question it. I wanted to know more about this, and above all, I wanted to understand why there were people between Pakistan and Iran that were so very different from the populations to the east and west of it. There was in Afghanistan to the north, but there was obviously also a Balochistan to the south, which didn't seem to belong anywhere. So back in Germany, in Freiburg, I went to the university library and searched for literature on Balochistan. And once again, I was literally knocked on my head, because apart from a very few colonial reprints, there was exactly one book available on Balochistan, and even that was more than 15 years old. Of course, I'm referring to Sally Harrison's In Afghanistan's Shadow, which perhaps many of you know. So without really looking for it, I had somehow found my object of study, something like a white spot on the world map of political science, some unknown and unexplored territory. Soon, Balochistan and its people became a love affair, and still today, 30 years later, I'm deeply in love with the country and its inhabitants. A love for life, I would say. As a scientist, of course, you have to keep your feelings and emotions under control and try to look at things and evaluate things as soberly and naturally as possible. This has always been difficult for me, I must admit, because it became clear very soon that injustice had been done in Balochistan for more than 75 years. A people, a nation, was divided, dismembered and instrumentalized by the British colonial power. And even after the end of the colonial era, this nation had not succeeded in asserting itself and determining itself. The Baloch, of course, are not alone in this. There are many nations in the post-colonial world which have not succeeded in establishing their own nation-state. But hardly any other nation without a state receives as little attention as the Baloch, and is so systematically ignored by world public opinion, even at times when neighboring countries like Iran, Afghanistan and Pakistan are in the focus of world attention, as of course was the case after the Soviet invasion in Afghanistan and the Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1979, and as was the case after 9/11, as we all know.
Hi, I'm Norbert Marie. My question to you is, in the event of China's successful development of water, what do you think, how much of a threat does it pose to Europe?
How much trade
Of a threat
to Europe?
To Europe, if China succeeds in developing water or gaining ground in water?
Yeah, you see, I mean, I know Gwadar, and I know the deep sea port in Gwadar even before there was CPEC. CPEC came later. First, the deep sea port was built, and the Makran Coastal Highway by Nawaz Sharif's third government, and Musharraf continued. There wasn't even talk of any CPEC. At that time, the deep sea port was not at all linked to China. It was claimed to be an entry point and an exit point for trade and natural resources of Central Asia. That's how Nawaz Sharif and Musharraf sold the whole project. I have never understood how Gwadar, just due to its geographical location, can play any role in trade, because there is no consumer population which you can reach by Gwadar. If you leave Gwadar, it's Balochistan, very sparsely populated. There is no demand for consumer goods that would reach Balochistan by Gwadar. I see no potential there. And the other way around is the same. There are no roads and railways that come from Central Asia or Afghanistan going down to Gwadar, which would be geographically the nearest point at the coast. But there has never been any construction of the necessary infrastructure. So when Gwadar was actually kicked off in 1999, 2000, I really was at a loss to understand what is the reason for that. And back then, the dominant theory was actually it has nothing to do with trade and transit, but is perhaps one of these, it's called string of pearls or something, that the actual aim and ambition is to have, for the Chinese, to have sort of a naval base there, that it has rather military strategic interests and not trade. Nowadays things look a little different. The port is there, and mind you, I mean, you have the Gwadar deep sea port, and then a road going along the coast to Karachi, the Makran Coastal Highway, which absolutely makes no sense. I mean, why should you bring things to Gwadar and then put it on trucks and bring it along the coastal highway to Karachi and then go up north? But of course I'm aware of the fact that in the meantime things have changed a little bit. Some roads are being built from Gwadar heading to Khoshab, basically to Quetta and then northwards. There will be maybe one or two roads. I don't know if they will actually manage to build a railway track as well. But it will be sort of a port with one or two arteries leaving that port. There's, in foreseeable future, there will be no economically interesting hinterland to Gwadar. So things in future perhaps will arrive in Gwadar and be shipped on to China and vice versa. But honestly speaking, I don't really see this materializing. Perhaps you are aware, we we do have this Karakorum highway, this strategic link road to China since the late 60s. And back then it was celebrated as a very important economic road as well. Promises of lots of trade between China and Pakistan. But most of us will know that the Karakorum highway is closed from September to May. More than half of the year the road is not usable because it's snow covered. So whatever exchange has taken place in the past 30-40 years on that Karakorum highway was always limited to a few months of the year. That is not really an economic link road that makes sense. I think even the old Karakorum highway was more of a measure to make Pakistan feel that China is a very good, big, old friend in the north to it. But it never had any economic reasoning behind it. And concerning the new CPEC, I'm not really in a position to say if this is going to work out or not. I know the Karakorum highway, I know the terrain, and I would say that is not a good and natural trade route, because it will be closed for perhaps half of the year. This is not a link where you can have reliable trade and exchange on a daily basis. But who knows? I mean, the Chinese have managed to build a railway to Lhasa in Tibet, which was always considered impossible. They have managed, it's running day and night, 365 days a year. So I don't know if they will build a huge tunnel through the whole Karakorum, but I think it has not. The real potential of CPEC that I see, not as an expert but just as an observer, is definitely much less than the hype that is behind CPEC. Concerning any trade advantages for Europe, I don't know. I mean, what would you expect to be shipped from Gwadar to Europe or to world markets in general? Products coming from China on road through the Karakorum all the way to Gwadar and then being shipped to Europe? I don't think that makes much sense.
Thank you very much that I can take part on this meeting. My name is Joachim Griesbaum. I'm living with my family here in Hamburg, and I'm one of the speakers of ICOR Europe. ICOR, that's an organization around the world with more than 60 parties, organization, memberships of trade union, of movement, and we are the opinion and the practical that we must go together around the world if we have a successful fighting for a national and a social world where the people are standing in all these things, and not the profit, not the war, and all things. It's better for you and me if I now speak in my language, German. I hope you can understand me. If there are some problems, tell it. We found a way to translate it. I'm not so long part. Also, vielen Dank nochmal. Der Schwerpunkt von meinem Beitrag für dieses Treffen hier, für diese Teilnahme, wo ich mich herzlich bedanke. liegt auf der Frage des Zusammenhangs von Balochistan, dem Kampf um die Befreiung Balochistan und der gesamten Entwicklung auf der Welt, weil ich glaube, man kann es nicht voneinander trennen. Das Volk von Balochistan lebt heute in einem geteilten Land. Das Heimatland ist unter den 3 Staaten Pakistan, Iran und Afghanistan aufgeteilt. Man muss sagen, aufgeteilt worden. Wir unterstützen euer Anliegen und euren Kampf von ganzem Herzen für ein souveränes, freies und demokratisches Balochistan und fügen hinzu, auf dem Weg zu einer Gesellschaft ohne die leider alltägliche und weltumspannende kapitalistische Ausbeutung und Unterdrückung, die unserer Meinung nach der letzte Grund dafür ist, dass Völkern nicht gestattet wird, als eine Nation in einem Land, in einem Gebiet zu leben. Die Teilung, Vertreibung und Unterdrückung des Volks von Balochistan ist Ergebnis einer menschenverachtenden Kolonialpolitik. Und es ist eine imperiale Politik, die weltweit sich gegen den Befreiungskampf des Volkes von Balochistan auch richtet. Euer Kampf um nationale und soziale Befreiung wird seit vielen Jahrzehnten blutig unterdrückt. Solidarität gibt es allein von den Völkern der Welt, den Arbeitern, Frauen, Studenten, allen Unterdrückten dieser Erde, die selbst um ihre soziale und nationale Befreiung kämpfen müssen. Was ist der Zusammenhang der Zeit? Fast alle imperialistischen Länder und Regierungen sind derzeit bereit, für ihren Einfluss um Macht, Märkte, politische und militärische Einflussgebiete einen 3. Weltkrieg zu riskieren. In der Ukraine stehen sich seit über einem Jahr Russland und die verschiedenen Verbündeten, wie zum Beispiel der Iran, aber auch China, auf der einen, die Ukraine im Verbund mit der NATO und dem US-Imperialismus auf der anderen Seite entgegen. Über 200.000 Soldaten haben auf den Schlachtfeldern schon ihr Leben verloren. Und etwa 1,2 Billionen US-Dollar an wirtschaftlichen Schäden wurden angerichtet. Während das Volk von Balochistan, aber auch in Kurdistan, Palästina, in bitterer Armut leben, werden die gigantischen Profite für eine Handvoll internationaler Monopole und ihre weltumspannende Herrschaft wie selbstverständlich beansprucht. Das faschistische Regime in dem neuimperialistischen Iran errichtete eine 900 Kilometer lange Mauer an der sogenannten Goldsmith-Linie, von den britischen Imperialisten gezogen, um die balochische Nation dauerhaft zu teilen. Gerade die Menschen in Deutschland wissen sehr genau, was es heißt, wenn ein Land, ein Staat durch eine Mauer getrennt wird. Aber wir haben eine Entwicklung, die auch, finde ich, große Hoffnung macht. Im heldenhaften Aufstand des iranischen Volkes seit dem Herbst 2022 nimmt auch das Volk von Balochistan eine ganz wichtige Rolle ein. Seite an Seite mit den mehreren Völkern, die im Iran sozusagen beheimatet sind, das persische Volk, das kurdische aus Balochistan, stehen eigentlich mehr und mehr gemeinsam in diesem Kampf für ihre Befreiung im Iran. Allerdings zahlen sie dafür auch einen ziemlichen Preis. Allein an einem Tag im Herbst letzten Jahres wurden in der Provinz Balochistan über 150 Menschen ermordet, weil sie sich an diesen Rebellion gegen das Regime beteiligt haben. Ich möchte an der Stelle auch ausdrücklich allen Familien, Freunden, die sozusagen Menschen verloren haben in dieser Auseinandersetzung, unser Beileid ausdrücken, aber auch den Respekt vor diesen Völkern, wie Balochistan, wie von Kurdistan, die diesen Freiheitskampf führen. Und es wird auch keinen anderen Weg geben, um zur Freiheit zu gelangen. Als Revolutionäre, als link eingestellte Menschen wissen wir, dass letztendlich der Kampf um nationale Befreiung immer mit dem Kampf um soziale Befreiung einhergehen. Und wir wissen auch, dass ein Volk allein kaum den Weg der Befreiung gehen kann. den Weg schon, aber er muss erfolgreich sein. Deswegen setzen wir uns für eine gemeinsame Vorbereitung des Freiheitskampfes ein, egal wo er stattfindet auf dieser Welt. Der Freiheitskampf des kurdischen Volkes, des Volkes von Palästina, des Volkes von Balochistan, aber auch bedeutende Arbeiterkämpfe international, der Kampf gegen die Abwälzung der Krisen und Kriegslasten oder auch der immer wichtiger gewordene Kampf zum Schutz der Umwelt. All diese Kämpfe können und dürfen nicht isoliert betrachtet und geführt werden. Es kam in der Diskussion schon vorhin, warum weiß man eigentlich so wenig über Balochistan? Ich kannte es ehrlich gesagt auch bis vor 7, 8 Jahren, war mir das kein Begriff. Warum? Weil die Weltöffentlichkeit einfach über solche Regionen, über solche Entwicklungen nicht informiert wird. Es gibt kein Interesse daran, dass Balochistan, das Kurdistan, das Palästina, was weiß ich für Teile dieser Welt, dass sie Gegenstand sind der Weltöffentlichkeit. Und deswegen ist es auch so wichtig und eine Aufgabe, die wir als ICOR vertreten, dass wir diese Information herstellen. Weil wir wissen, es ist notwendig, dass wir uns gegenseitig kennen, dass wir uns gegenseitig unterstützen und dass wir diese Freundschaften, die wir zwischen den Völkern knüpfen wollen, das müssen wir selbst machen.
I want to introduce myself. My name is Kawe Fatehi from Rojhelat. Rojhelat is the eastern part of Kurdistan, which is located in Iran, and we can say that Kurdistan is part of Iran. I'm gonna focus on the topic that I chose, and it is the streets of Kurdistan. So, what I mean by the streets of Kurdistan, so you know that after on the 16th September of 2022, after the killing of Jina Amini, a Kurdish girl, by the morality police of Iranian morality police, so a lot of people took to the streets in Kurdistan, in Aichi gravestone in Sakaz. Sakaz is the Kurdish city in Kurdistan of Iran, and they chanted Jinjian Azadi, or Women, Life, Freedom, because Jina was killed because of compulsory hijab, and compulsory hijab means that all the rules of Iranian rules, Islamic Republic of Iran, I think, so is against the women in Iran. And after that, the uprising on the streets of Kurdistan took place, and the slogan and the motto, Jinjian Azadi, was spread over across Iran and across the world, and in Balochistan too. So, but what I mean by the Jinjian Azadi, or what does it mean? So, Jinjian Azadi is based on a political philosophy of Abdullah Öcalan, the imprisoned leader of Kurdistan's Workers' Party, and he said that he has got a kind of famous phrase. He said, the society is not liberated without the liberation of women. Because of that, he said, so Jinjian Azadi, or Women, Life, Freedom. Because the first step to liberate the society is to liberate the women from slavery, from 5,000 history of enslavement of women in the world, I think, yeah. So, but Jin means women, and women are oppressed all over the world, and especially in the Middle East, and especially in Iran, in these days, I think, yes, so we know that. And Jian means life, and it refers to the existence of the people, of the oppressed people, of those people who has been marginalized, isolated from participating in the political process or the political power. So when Azadi means freedom, so the people should be free to make a decision, to make a kind of political decision or something like that. They want to be a political subject. So, and after the uprising, so the people in Kurdistan has been organized themselves to protest against the Islamic Republic of Iran. And in fact, Iranian nationalism. So Iranian religious, or we can say that Iranian religious nationalism. Because the Kurdish people and the other ethnic groups or other nations in Iran so has been oppressed by the a kind of Iranian religious or Iranian nationalist after the nation state building in 1925. So after the 1925, the nation state of Iran has been established and has been constructed. So after that, and it is based on a kind of one flag, one nation, and one language. So one nation refers to just Persian nation in Iran. One flag that is just one flag that based on a kind of hierarchical or nationalistic Iranian ideas. And one language is the language of Persian language. And all, the other ethnic groups or the other nations in Iran has been cracked down by forbidding their language, forbidding their culture, forbidding their participation in the political process or the political power or something like that. So on Kurdish people and Balochian, I think, has been faced with assimilation, colonization, that I mean the internal colonization. So because all of their elements, all of the Kurdish elements has been forbidden in Iran. But this oppression has been lasted for 100 years up to today that we talk about a kind of real revolution in Iran and in Kurdistan. So I want to go back to Xinjiang Azadi slogan. Xinjiang Azadi slogan, or Women, Life, Freedom, is a kind of intersectional concept. It is interconnected with the Kurdish oppression in Iran and the women's oppression and colonization, internal colonization. So, and the Kurdish liberation movement is going to achieve their freedom, achieve a kind of self-determination, self-administration. And they want to decide about their future, about their destiny on their own. And they don't want to, I think, be assimilated anymore. And they want to speak in their language and the Kurdish language. They want to, I think, study in their mother language. Because as a person here, that I am here, I couldn't study in my language, in my mother language, the Kurdish language. But, so I learned Persian, and it is kind of assimilation, assimilated into another people. So because of that, the Kurdish liberation movement is going to fight against the patriarchal system or hierarchical system and the oppression which Kurdish people are faced with, as well as the Balochian people. And now, in the current situation, there are so many groups fighting against Islamic Republic of Iran. And I can divide them into two parts. The leftist and the right side, I think. The right side, believes in a kind of nationalist, Iranian nationalism. That is which includes the last dictator's son and some celebrities around him. And they postpone everything. They postpone every demands of the other minorities, other marginalized nations and marginalized ethnics after the revolution. And I think that it's a kind of reactionary behavior and reactionary idea. But the left side, based on Xinjiang Azadi, want to determine and want to make everything now and today clear. If there is a kind of self-determination for, so if there is self-determination, it should be for all the minorities, for all ethnic groups. So the right side is based on a kind of monarchist, they are monarchism, because they think that they can take the history back to now, and they want to I think establish and construct a kind of kingdom in Iran, but in the expense of tracking down once more the other nations, the other minorities, the other ethnic groups in Iran. So but the different kinds of liberation movements in Iran, such as Kurdish liberation movement, are standing against these monarchism, this religious nationalism, and the other kinds of oppression. Because women life freedom stands against and fights against all kinds of oppression. So, and it cannot accept any oppressions which people are faced with. For example, the women, LGBTQs in Iran, and the ethnic groups. So, and now, so as we see that, every Friday in Balochistan, people took to the street to protest against the Islamic Republic of Iran. And they fight against both sides, the right wing and the right wing that consists of monarchism and the current state of Iran. So, and in Kurdistan, people organize themselves, so to make an opportunity, to pave the way for protesting more and more. And there is a kind of interconnection between Balochistan and Kurdistan in protesting against the such a system. They want to overturn, based on this slogan, they want to overturn the total social, political structure and structure. So, but the right wing of Iran, so which introduced themselves as an opposition, they call it a kind of regime change that is not a kind of real revolution. But for the left wing and for the Kurdish, liberation movement is a kind of revolution to overturn, to abolish, and to abolish this socio-political structure. But they want to just change the regime, change the surface of the state, not so deeply, because they want to have and keep the military forces, security forces, in the same way that it is now in Iran, there is now in Iran, but the left wing and the Kurdish and Balochian liberation movement want to overturn it. So, and based on this slogan, which the revolution happened in Iran, which has lasted for 100 days and is still alive. More than 150 people in Kurdistan has been killed by the security forces, by Iranian security forces, and the same in Balochistan, same as in Balochistan. On more than 12,000 people has been arrested and captured by the security forces, and they are in prison. So more than 5,000 people has been injured. So why? To get back the monarchism or to overturn this system in Iran. I know that, and I'm sure that they want to overturn and overthrow such a system in Iran, because they don't want to experience more and more such an oppression. They want to be liberated. Thank you so much.
The Pakistani state is taking care of that sort of blackout. But even if a Chinese consulate in Karachi is attacked, no one cares, no one reports, no one asks questions.
Well, that attack, I was surprised. It gathered some attention as compared to the rest of the Balochistan.
Well, yeah, maybe a day or two.
Yeah, exactly.
And maybe 3 sentences, but
That was it.
Yeah, and the problem is that people understand that there's been an attack against the consulate, the Chinese consulate in Karachi, but there's no time to explain to people what's behind the attack. There's no time to give the background of a conflict. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hello. My question is about, as far as you are a journalist, it's about media coverage. Like, it's the same question as our friend asked, but why media doesn't coverage the protest of other, we are protesting every day or every month or every week even. But the media coverage only the protest. If I can say an example, only the Iranian protest, they only coverages the protest of the ones who are supporting the Iranian previous government, Shah, as you know, or have any idea about that. Why we as a Baloch are being ignored all around the world while we are every, as I said, months or days protesting, why we are not being seen? As you are a journalist, what do you think about that?
Well, first of all, because journalists, foreign journalists cannot get to the area. You cannot have like the regular CNN guy reporting from Saidam, there's no BBC or whatever, not even freelancers. Local journalists, to be a local journalist in Saidam or in Pakistan, in Balochistan, must be a real nightmare. I mean, so many have been killed. And I think that with the little glimpse we have at those protests come from the main cities, because that's where the teams are based. You know, because France 24, maybe they have a team in Tehran at that moment. Of course, they would. All my colleagues are, they would love to go down to Tehran. Many of them ask me, but there's no way. There's no way. They will be banned and they will be kicked away or even beaten. It has happened.
No, my question is about around how the world, not only in Iran, even in here in Germany, we don't have the coverage from the media for all protests.
Yeah, exactly. That's because of that. Because you need the local European or Western guy to go down there to report on the story. If it's a local guy telling the story, unfortunately, it's like that.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're from the Basque Country, and I'm wondering how it affects your connection with the people in Balochistan and Kurdistan, all this reporting.
Well, I guess that belonging to a minority also gives you a different Google to look at maps. You don't look at that much at political maps, but at maps which adapt much better to the realities of places, to the diversity we mentioned before. I wouldn't say I approach this conflict on a nationalist basis. I'm very much into diversity. I really think that diversity is enriching, and I want to live in a country, in an area where I can learn from different people from different countries. I wouldn't like to live in a Basque country where just Basque is spoken or where I'm just surrounded by fellow Basques. That would be super boring. So in this case, I also have this pulsion for this very high interest for culture, for history, for anthropology, and I guess that's also one of the reasons that took me to cover all these regions, all these conflicts.
The question was, what was your impression or thoughts when you found out about what's happening in Balochistan? And what would you tell to the world to see exactly what's happening in Balochistan, to know about our occupation? Because everyone knows media doesn't show that out. Thank you.
I think the key is to empower local journalists, to teach, to try to train local journalists on the standards on Western media. I've come across many local journalists over the last 20 years, and all of them they know the story much better than me. They speak the language, they're local, they know what's going on. The only thing they need to know is how to pitch a story, how to build a story. And I found many people who are doing activism, and activism is important, but journalism is important, especially in countries, in places where you don't have foreign media. So I would devote all my energy to train local journalists on Western standards of making news, of writing features, of doing TV clips. We actually doing it. Three of us. We have this program in Kurdistan, Iraq, and in Armenia. It's working fine. Problem is that we could not do the same thing in Balochistan. We cannot go there to train people. We could train people online, for example. But believe me, it's much easier than expected. Most of them get it in a couple of days. So sometimes it's just that you're not including all the necessary sources. You have to speak to officials, you have to include NGO, or you have to still include the statistics, all that. Some people write great stories. If they just include just a few things that are missing, especially to train you how to pitch a story. Pitching is probably the most important thing. You may have a great story, but if you don't know how to approach foreign media, you're never going to get it.
Thank you.
So my idea is, wouldn't these new social media be an avenue, a possibility for the Baluch in 3 different countries to send out news about what's happening? They don't need newspapers, do they?
No. But and they're actually doing that. I mean, if you follow the right people, we have our friends running Baloch Warna, for example, which is a referential website. But problem is credibility. For some reason, the mainstream audience won't have any interest for that. You need like very senior media, like let's say, you need the New York Times to put the conflict on the table. Once they go there, the rest will come in a row. You will be. I've seen it in Rojava actually. I was pitching this story. I was filing the story on the Syrian Kurds in 2012. A few people were buying those stories. Once you have the CNN there, then the other ones come because I have the feeling I'm missing something. I should be there too. So yeah, unfortunately, the media world is very complex, and there are lots of like hidden trends, and they are difficult to understand. And sometimes it's just like, okay, this story came out and it opened the box, right? Problem is that the New York Times cannot go to Eastern Balochistan. That's the thing.
Thank you.
The initiation should have come from the ground. Now, since you have been there, you have seen the hardships, the difficulties, the problems. The journalists who hailed from Balochistan were one by one searched, found and killed, or their bodies were dumped. In such a situation, how do you think the people from the ground can report something that can get attention?
Ask Habib. He knows better. He's a local journalist and he's here.
He is alive because he came to Germany. Otherwise, anything could happen. So in such a situation, like how do you see things
That's the thing. It's a death trap. It's a death trap. I guess that you can use fake names, but at the end, at some point, they will manage to find who you are. And yeah, but I'd rather he could speak, he could talk about things, because I think it will be very, very interesting for the rest of us to understand what being a local journalist is like in a place like Balochistan.